I was winning the biggest case of my career when my phone buzzed with the news that would shatter my world. There I stood in the Minneapolis federal courthouse, my charcoal suit crisp despite the November chill, delivering the closing argument that would bring Midwest Chemical Corporation to its knees for poisoning the Mississippi watershed. The jury was eating from my hand. My boss was already mentally spending the bonus, and my damn phone wouldn't stop vibrating against my hip. Your Honor, the evidence clearly demonstrates that Midwest Chemical knowingly dumped carcinogenic waste for 17 years while falsifying environmental reports. My voice never wavered, even as I felt the persistent buzz. 17 missed calls now. Something was wrong. The moment Judge Harmon announced we'd reconvene after lunch, I bolted to the marble hallway, phone already at my ear. The voicemail from my doctor played as the courthouse doors swung open, blasting me with cold air and the distant sounds of drums and cheering from the Thanksgiving parade. Ens Torres, we need to discuss your test results immediately. Cancer. The word hung in the air between us when I called back. Just like my mother, just like my grandmother. The genetic lottery I'd been dreading since I was old enough to understand what killed the women in my family. I ended the call, numb, and wandered outside, my body on autopilot. The parade was a blur of colors and noise. Children laughed. Marching bands played. Enormous balloons bobbed against the steel-gray Minneapolis sky. None of it seemed real. I clutched my coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in the universe, steam rising to fog my glasses as I pushed through the crowd. Watch it! The voice cut through my daze as hot liquid splashed between us. My coffee had collided with someone else's cup, creating a scalding waterfall that soaked her cream-colored wool coat. Great. Perfect. Just what this day needed. Oh, are you blind? She snapped, dabbing furiously at the spreading stain. Blonde hair escaped from beneath a knit cap, framing a face flushed with anger and cold, eyes so intensely blue they seemed unnatural fixed on mine. I'm sorry, I muttered, though I wasn't. Not really. Not with cancer cells potentially multiplying inside me while this stranger worried about her damn coat. Sorry doesn't fix this. Do you know how much this cost? She continued, her voice carrying over the parade music. Something in me snapped. Oh no, and I don't care. It's a coat. It's just stuff. There are actual problems in the world. She blinked, taken aback. Like what? The Midwest Chemical case? Because I've been following that disaster for years. Now it was my turn to be surprised. How did you... You're Ruby Torres. I recognized you from the news. And her tone softened slightly. I'm Summer Phillips. I run EcoAction Minnesota. The name clicked. The group that organized the river testing that broke our case open. She nodded, her anger seemingly forgotten. We've been trying to nail those bastards for a decade. A float passed by, some corporate monstrosity advertising Black Friday sales. Summer scoffed at it, and I found myself smiling for the first time that day. Let me buy you another coffee, I offered, suddenly not wanting to be alone with my thoughts. Only if you'll tell me how you're planning to make Midwest Chemical pay for every tumor they've caused. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, if only she knew. We found a cafe near the parade route, the smell of cinnamon and coffee beans temporarily drowning out my fear. As we talked strategy and environmental justice, I noticed her hands, elegant but strong, gesturing passionately as she spoke. The way she leaned forward when making a point. How her laugh seemed to start in her eyes before reaching her mouth. I told her about the case but kept my diagnosis locked behind my teeth. For those few hours it didn't exist. There was only this moment, this conversation, this unexpected connection amid the holiday chaos. When we finally parted ways, she pressed her business card into my palm. We should collaborate sometime. My organization could use a lawyer with your fire. I nodded, knowing I should tell her that my future had just become uncertain, that sometime might not exist for me. Instead, I said, I'd like that. She smiled, turned to leave, then looked back. Oh, by the way, I never actually liked that coat. Too conventional. Like something my ex would have picked. As I watched her disappear into the crowd, I couldn't have known that within 6 months, Summer Phillips would become both my fiercest competitor and the woman who would make me question everything I thought I knew about love and time. Or that the coat I ruined was the last gift from the woman who broke her heart. 3 weeks after the parade encounter, I sat in the senior partners conference room, watching Harold Whitman's jowls quiver with barely contained rage. The Midwest Chemical victory should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, it had become my professional funeral. "Ruby, this pro bono environmental crusade of yours has to stop," Harold said, tapping a manicured finger against the quarterly revenue report. "And you billed 700 fewer hours than any other senior associate last quarter." "Just won us the biggest environmental case in state history," I countered, the fresh surgical scar beneath my blouse still tender. The lumpectomy had been successful. Early stage, good margins. The doctors were optimistic. I hadn't told anyone at the firm. "And we've gotten excellent press," Patricia Lowell, the only female partner, interjected. "And Ted Harold's right. This isn't a charity. Your next case needs to be full fee, or you can kiss your partnership goodbye." I nodded mechanically, the familiar scent of lemon polish on the conference table suddenly nauseating. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, snow fell on downtown Minneapolis, muffling the city in white. I'd given this firm 7 years of my life, sacrificed relationships, postponed having children I might never have now. For what? To defend corporations just like the one I'd just defeated? Back in my office, I stared at the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer since Thanksgiving. Summer Phillips, Executive Director, EcoAction Minnesota. I'd looked her up after our coffee. Yale graduate, former corporate consultant who'd walked away from a 6-figure salary to start her environmental nonprofit. Impressive resume. Even more impressive in person. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Unknown number. "There's Ruby Torres speaking." "So, Ruby, it's Summer Phillips. From the coffee disaster." Her voice carried a smile. "I've been following the conclusion of your case. Congratulations on the win." "Thanks." I swiveled my chair to face the window, watching snowflakes spiral past, though my bosses seem less than thrilled about it. "And corporate law firms rarely appreciate saving the planet if it hurts the bottom line," she said. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I have a proposition for you. Can we meet?" 2 hours later, I found myself in a converted warehouse space in the Arts District. EcoAction Minnesota's headquarters was everything my law firm wasn't. Open concept, plants everywhere, recycled furniture, and walls covered with maps and protest posters. Summer greeted me wearing jeans and a fitted blazer, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, so different from the parade day. "Welcome to organized chaos," she said, leading me through a maze of desks where 20-somethings typed furiously on laptops. "We're small but mighty." Her office overlooked the Mississippi River, gray and sluggish with winter. She motioned me to a chair made from reclaimed wood and perched on the edge of her desk. "Have you heard about the Greenovation Challenge?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's a national competition for sustainable urban development solutions. First prize is $2 million in seed funding." Her eyes sparkled with intensity. "And entering. But I need a legal expert who understands environmental regulations inside and out." "And you thought of me?" "I've read every brief you filed against Midwest Chemical. You're brilliant." The compliment hit me with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had called me brilliant instead of just billing me out at $400 an hour? "What's the catch?" I asked. "We'd be partners, equal stake, and it's a 6-month commitment." She slid a prospectus across the desk. "When the money would let me scale EcoAction's work tenfold, and you." "And me what?" Summer tilted her head, studying me. "And you look like someone who might be questioning her path." The observation was too close to home. I glanced away, out at the river that had brought us together in the first place. "I can't just leave my firm," I said, though the idea sent an illicit thrill through me. "And she wouldn't have to. Not yet, anyway." She smiled. "And just moonlight as my legal counsel and competition partner. If we win, then decide." I flipped through the prospectus. The competition was prestigious, the judges influential. Win or lose, the connections alone would be valuable. And 6 months working with Summer Phillips. "Ain't I should think about it," I said, standing to leave. Summer walked me to the door, her hand briefly touching my arm. The deadline's Friday. "But I have a feeling about you, Ruby Torres. You didn't become an environmental lawyer to get rich." "No," I admitted. "Sen, I didn't." "So why did you?" The question hung between us. I could have told her about growing up downriver from a paper mill, about my mother's early death, about my own diagnosis. Instead, I said, "See, and I believe in fighting winnable battles." "Tis is winnable," she said, her face close enough that I could smell her perfume, something earthy and subtle. "With you on board." That night, I sat in my sterile condo overlooking the city lights, the prospectus open on my lap, my doctor's follow-up appointment reminder blinking on my phone. 6 months of treatment ahead, 6 months of the competition, a coincidence that felt like fate. I texted Summer before I could change my mind, "Ain't I'm in." Her reply came seconds later, "And I knew you would be. We start tomorrow." I didn't know then that saying yes to Summer Phillips would mean competing against my own law firm's biggest client, or that the woman who'd spilled coffee on her coat would soon make me forget what it felt like to be afraid of dying. Tints is completely impractical. I slammed my hand on the blueprint spread across Summer's dining room table. 2 weeks into our partnership, and we were already at an impasse. Outside, January winds howled against the windows of her loft apartment, a converted flour mill with exposed brick walls and pipes that clanked in the night. "Oh, and you can't propose rooftop gardens on every building in the downtown corridor. The structural requirements alone." "The point is to be bold," Summer countered, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. She wore an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder, revealing a constellation of freckles I found myself staring at more often than I should. "And the Greenovation judges want revolutionary thinking, not another incremental improvement plan. Then also want something that won't get laughed out of the preliminary round." I rubbed my temples, fatigue settling into my bones. The radiation treatments had started last week, and though I hadn't told Summer about my cancer, the exhaustion was becoming harder to hide. She studied me with those penetrating blue eyes. "Oh, you look terrible." "Thanks. I mean it. Are you sleeping?" I avoided her gaze. "I'm fine, just busy juggling this and my actual job." Summer sighed and disappeared into her kitchen, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "And ginger tea, my grandmother's cure for everything." The warmth seeped into my cold hands as I accepted the mug. Meme abuela believed tequila was the universal medicine. "And smart woman." Summer smiled, then grew serious. "Look, I know we approach things differently. You're methodical, I'm not. But that's why we'll win. We balance each other." I took a sip of tea, surprised by its soothing effect. "We need a compromise. Something visionary but legally and structurally sound. What about focusing on the riverfront development section?" Summer reached across me for her laptop, her arm brushing mine. "If we can prove the economic benefits of green infrastructure there, we can make a case for expanding outward." For the next 3 hours, we reworked our proposal. Summer's vision tempered by my practicality. As the night deepened, our ideas began to flow together, sentences finishing each other's thoughts. By midnight, we had something that felt right, ambitious yet achievable. "Then this could actually work," I admitted, leaning back in my chair. Summer's face lit up. "See? I told you we'd make a good team." She stood and stretched, her sweater riding up to reveal a strip of skin above her jeans. I looked away quickly, blaming my sudden flush on the tea. "Want another?" she asked, reaching for my empty mug. "And I should probably go. Early meeting tomorrow." "Stay." The word hung between us, simple, yet weighted. "It's late, the roads are icy, and I have a perfectly good guest room." I hesitated, but the thought of driving home through the Minnesota winter night held little appeal. "Yeah, all right, thanks." Later, wearing borrowed pajamas that smelled like Summer's laundry detergent, I wandered her apartment while she showered. Photos lined her bookshelves, Summer with various groups of people, always outdoors, always smiling. One showed her standing before Congress, testifying. Another captured her being arrested at a pipeline protest, looking defiant even in handcuffs. "And it was 3 years ago," her voice came from behind me. "And the charges were eventually dropped." I turned to find her in a threadbare t-shirt and flannel pants, hair damp and darkened to honey gold. "You're quite the activist." "And I wasn't always." She moved beside me, picking up a photo I hadn't noticed. Summer in a corporate setting, hair pulled back severely, standing next to an older man in an expensive suit. That was me at my father's investment firm. I was on track to take over someday. "What happened?" She replaced the photo, her expression clouding. Meantime, my mother got sick. Ovarian cancer. The doctors couldn't figure out why until we discovered our well water had been contaminated by a nearby fracking operation. Her voice hardened. She died believing no one would ever be held accountable. The coincidence of our mother's fate sent a chill through me. Is that why you started Eco-Action? Summer nodded. And I quit the next day. Dad hasn't spoken to me since. She shrugged, but I could see the hurt beneath her casual gesture. On enough about my tragic backstory. What about you? What made Ruby Torres take on corporate giants? I could have told her then, about my own diagnosis, about how I understood her loss more intimately than she knew. Instead, I said, I grew up poor in a neighborhood where the air made your eyes water. Environmental justice isn't abstract when you've lived without it. Something shifted in her gaze, respect perhaps, or recognition of a shared purpose. We stood close enough that I could see the flecks of darker blue in her irises, feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Monsieur, we should get some sleep, I said finally, breaking the moment. A big day tomorrow. The next morning, we presented our preliminary proposal to the Greenovation judges via video conference. Summer spoke with passion about our vision for a sustainable riverfront district, while I outlined the legal framework that would make it possible. When we finished, the lead judge, a renowned architect from Copenhagen, nodded approvingly. Congratulations, she said. You've advanced to the semifinals. Summer squealed and threw her arms around me, the scent of her shampoo enveloping me as she pressed her cheek against mine. We did it! As I returned her embrace, I caught sight of our reflection in her window. Two women holding each other against the backdrop of the Minneapolis skyline, the river winding below like a promise. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt something other than fear. Something dangerously close to hope. What I didn't know then was that our greatest challenge wasn't the competition itself, but the rival team we'd face in the next round, led by none other than Summer's estranged father. Someone accessed our server last night, Summer announced, bursting into my office without knocking. 6 weeks had passed since we'd advanced to the semifinals, and we'd fallen into a comfortable routine. Days at our respective jobs, evenings working on our Greenovation proposal. I glanced up from the brief I was drafting. What do you mean, accessed? I mean, someone hacked us. She paced before my desk, agitation visible in every movement. The entire presentation, the technical specifications, everything. Someone downloaded it all. Are you sure it wasn't one of your staff? Until 2 a.m.? Using an IP address that traces back to Phillips Investment Group? Her voice cracked slightly. And my father's company. I leaned back, processing this. Your father's competing against us? Apparently. She ran a hand through her hair. Phillips Sustainable Development is one of the 4 semi-finalist teams. I just found out this morning. The implications hit me immediately. Summer, if they've seen our proposal, when set, we have to start over. She collapsed into the chair across from me. 3 months of work, gone. I checked my watch. My radiation appointment was in an hour, but Summer looked so defeated I couldn't leave her. Not necessarily. We know their weakness. They think like corporate investors. We can pivot to something they'd never consider. Hope flickered across her face. Like what? Community ownership models, worker cooperatives, things that prioritize people over profit margins. I was thinking aloud now, ideas forming rapidly. Her father would never propose something that distributes power instead of consolidating it. Summer stared at me, then broke into a slow smile. Ruby Torres, you brilliant woman. That's exactly what we'll do. We worked through the night, ordering takeout and filling my office whiteboard with new concepts. By morning, we had the framework for a completely revised proposal, one that maintained our environmental goals while adding a revolutionary social component. When we should celebrate, Summer declared as we stumbled, bleary-eyed but triumphant, out of my office building into the crisp March air. And dinner tonight? My treat. I hesitated. My energy was depleted from the all-nighter and weeks of treatment. I don't know, but, please? She touched my arm, her fingers warm through my coat sleeve. When you saved our project, let me thank you properly. Something in her expression made it impossible to refuse. All right, dinner. That evening, Summer picked me up in her electric car, looking nothing like the frazzled activist who'd stormed my office that morning. She wore a simple black dress that highlighted the elegant line of her collarbone, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You look nice," I said, suddenly self-conscious in my own outfit, chosen to hide how much weight I'd lost during treatment. "So do you." Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long before she turned back to the road. The restaurant was intimate, tucked away in a historic building with stone walls and flickering candles. Over wine and sparkling water, we talked about everything except the competition. Books we loved, places we'd traveled, the stray cat Summer had been feeding on her fire escape. "I named him Justice," she said, laughing. "And because he shows up demanding to be served." I found myself laughing more than I had in months. The weight of my secret diagnosis, the pressure of the competition, the demands of my firm, all seemed to recede in Summer's presence. When the dessert menu came, Summer reached across the table for the wine bottle, her fingers brushing mine. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The contact sent an electric current up my arm, settling somewhere beneath my ribs. "Ruby," she said softly, "I'm really glad you agreed to work with me. Even though I argue with every idea you have? Especially because of that." Her smile turned wistful. "Most people in my life either blindly agree with me or completely dismiss me. You actually engage. You make me think harder." The candlelight caught the gold in her hair, the curve of her lips. I found myself wondering what it would be like to kiss her, then immediately tried to banish the thought. This was a professional partnership, nothing more. "Earth to Ruby?" Summer waved her hand before my face. "Phone, you disappeared on me." "Sorry." I blinked, embarrassed. "Just tired." Her expression turned concerned. "Oh, you've seemed exhausted lately. Is everything okay?" The moment hung between us, a perfect opportunity to tell her the truth. Instead, I said, "Just working too hard. Nothing new." Summer didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. As we left the restaurant, snow began to fall, fat flakes drifting lazily in the glow of street lamps. She insisted on walking me to my door, our shoulders occasionally bumping as we navigated the slippery sidewalk. At my building entrance, we faced each other awkwardly. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "Thank you for saving our project." She hesitated, then stepped closer. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought she might kiss me. Instead, she brushed a snowflake from my hair, her touch feather light. "I'll get some rest, okay?" I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. That night, alone in my apartment, I stood before the bathroom mirror, examining the changes in my body, the hollows beneath my cheekbones, the pallor of my skin. My final radiation treatment was scheduled for next week. The prognosis was good, the doctors said. I'd beaten the odds that had taken my mother. So why couldn't I tell Summer? Why did the words stick in my throat every time I tried? The answer came to me as I climbed into bed, the memory of her fingers against my hair still tingling on my skin. I was falling for Summer Phillips, and nothing terrified me more than seeing the look in her eyes change from admiration to pity. What I didn't realize then was that my secret was about to become much harder to keep, and that the line between our professional and personal relationship was about to blur beyond recognition. "So you've been avoiding me," Summer's voice cut through the white noise of the coffee shop where I'd been hiding out for the past week. She slid into the chair across from me, uninvited, her expression a mixture of hurt and anger. I closed my laptop, buying time. I've been busy. The Henderson case. Bullshit. And the word was sharp enough to make the college student at the next table glance over. Summer leaned forward, lowering her voice. "When we had dinner, we had a moment, and then you disappeared. 10 unanswered texts, Ruby. What happened?" What happened was panic. What happened was waking up the morning after our dinner with the realization that I'd crossed a line in my own mind, one that threatened everything. Our partnership, the competition, my carefully constructed walls. "Nothing happened," I said finally. "I've just been swamped at work." Summer studied me, her blue eyes narrowing. "You're lying." "I don't know why, but you are." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, a reminder for my follow-up appointment with my oncologist. I turned it face down too quickly. "Who's Dr. Patel?" Summer asked, and I realized with horror that she'd seen the notification. "Hence my dermatologist." The lie tasted bitter. "And you're hiding something." Summer reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of mine. Whatever it is, Ruby, you can tell me. The concern in her voice nearly broke me. How easy it would be to confess everything, the diagnosis, the treatments, the fear that still woke me in the night despite the doctor's optimism. But the words wouldn't come. There's nothing to tell. I stood abruptly, gathering my things. I need to go. Fine. Summer rose too, her voice hardening. Saw it run away. But we have a presentation for the semi-finals in 3 days, and I'm not losing this competition because you can't handle whatever this is between us. And there is nothing between us, I snapped, louder than intended. Oh, we're business partners. That's all. The hurt that flashed across her face made me immediately regret my words. But before I could take them back, she turned and walked away, shoulders rigid with dignity. I watched her go, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. Then I headed to my appointment, where Dr. Patel confirmed what I'd been hoping to hear. My treatment had been successful. The cancer was in remission. I should have felt elated. Instead, I felt empty, the victory hollow without someone to share it with. That night, a spring storm rolled across Minneapolis, bringing thunder that rattled my windows and lightning that turned the sky electric blue. I paced my apartment, replaying my argument with Summer, knowing I needed to apologize but unsure how to bridge the gap I'd created. At 11, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Summer standing in my hallway, soaked from the rain, her blonde hair plastered to her head. What are you? And I was halfway home when the storm hit, she interrupted. Your place was closer. I stepped aside to let her in, noticing she was shivering. You're freezing. Let me get you something dry. While she changed into my sweatpants and Northwestern Law t-shirt, I made hot chocolate, an awkward peace offering. When she emerged from my bathroom, the sight of her in my clothes sent an unexpected wave of longing through me. Thanks, she said, accepting the mug. We stood in my kitchen, the silence between us broken only by thunder and the occasional car splashing through puddles below. I'm sorry, I said finally. What about today? I was out of line. Summer nodded, her expression unreadable. Why have you been avoiding me, Ruby? Really? I set down my mug, searching for words that wouldn't come. Outside, lightning flashed, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Perfect, I muttered into the darkness. Wait here. Summer's voice came from somewhere to my left. I heard her rummaging, then the flare of a match as she lit one of my seldom used candles. Her face appeared in the warm glow, shadows dancing across her features. Better? The candlelight transformed my sterile apartment, softening its edges. Summer moved to the window, watching the storm. I used to be terrified of thunder as a kid. My mom would light candles and tell me stories until I fell asleep. The mention of her mother, who, like mine, had been taken by cancer, loosened something in my chest. Summer, there's something I need to tell you. She turned, her face half in shadow. I'm listening. And I had cancer. The words hung in the air between us. And breast cancer. Early stage. I finished radiation last week. Her expression shifted from shock to understanding to something else, not pity as I'd feared, but a fierce protective tenderness. Why didn't you tell me? And I didn't want it to define me. Or us. Our partnership. I swallowed hard. And I didn't want you to look at me differently. She crossed the room slowly, stopping before me. How would I look at you differently? Like I'm fragile. Breakable. Summer shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. Ruby Torres, you're the least breakable person I've ever met. Then she was kissing me, her lips soft and insistent against mine, tasting of chocolate and rain. I froze for a heartbeat, then surrendered, my hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. The storm outside seemed to mirror the one within me. Wild, electric, inevitable. When we finally broke apart, breathless, Summer rested her forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that since you spilled coffee on my coat. I thought you were furious about that coat, I whispered, still not quite believing what had just happened. And I was. But I was also intrigued by the beautiful, intense woman who didn't back down from me. Her fingers traced my jawline. Still am. We spent the night talking by candlelight, about my diagnosis, her mother's death, our fears, our hopes. When the power finally returned at dawn, it felt like an intrusion from another world. Semifinals are tomorrow, Summer said, her head on my shoulder as we watched the sunrise from my couch. And are we ready? I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from adversaries to partners, to something much more complicated. Yes, I said, kissing her temple. We're ready. What I didn't know then was that our personal breakthrough was about to be tested by the most public challenge yet, and that Summer's past was about to collide with our future in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The Minneapolis Convention Center buzzed with activity as teams prepared their presentations for the Greenovation semifinals. Summer and I moved through the space like professional dancers who'd practiced their routine for years, not months. Setting up our display boards, checking the digital presentation, arranging our scale model of the riverfront development. Phillips Sustainable Development is in the East Hall, Summer murmured, straightening a poster. When my father's already working the judges? I followed her gaze to where Maxwell Phillips, a silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit, was chatting with two of the competition judges. Even from a distance, I could see Summer's jawline in his profile, her determined posture in his stance. And honey doesn't intimidate me, I said, squeezing her hand briefly when no one was looking. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He should. He's ruthless. We'd agreed to keep our relationship private during the competition, partly for professional reasons, partly because Summer wasn't ready to face her father with this new development in her life. What existed between us was still tender, new, unfolding in private moments, morning coffee in my kitchen, late-night phone calls, stolen kisses in the elevator of her building. Our presentation went flawlessly. Summer spoke with passion about our community ownership model, while I detailed the legal framework that would make it viable. The judges asked tough questions, but we'd prepared for every angle. When we finished, the applause was enthusiastic. One nailed it, Summer whispered as we left the stage. Ms. Phillips. A deep voice stopped us. Maxwell Phillips stood blocking our path, flanked by two younger men in suits identical to his. Quite the performance. Summer stiffened beside me. Dad. I didn't realize you'd be here personally. When I heard my daughter was competing, how could I stay away? His smile didn't reach his cold blue eyes, the same color as Summer's but lacking her warmth. Won't you introduce me to your partner? And Ruby Torres, I said before Summer could speak, extending my hand. Environmental attorney. His handshake was firm, assessing. Yes, the crusader who took down Midwest Chemical. Impressive, if misguided. He turned back to Summer. Once your mother would be proud of your idealism? I felt Summer flinch beside me. Don't, she said quietly. Don't use Mom to manipulate me. Maxwell's expression hardened. Still so dramatic. I'm simply acknowledging your passion, misplaced though it may be. He checked his watch. And I should return to my team. Good luck, though I doubt you'll need it with the judge's obvious bias toward diversity candidates. He walked away, leaving a chill in his wake. I'm sorry, Summer said once he was out of earshot. He's always been like that. Then you have nothing to apologize for. I resisted the urge to take her hand in public. Let's get some air. Outside, spring sunshine warmed the plaza. Summer paced, her professional composure cracking. Oh, he's here to sabotage us, I know it. He can try, I said. But our proposal stands on its merits. She stopped pacing and looked at me, vulnerability plain on her face. Ruby, there's something I need to tell you, about my father. Before she could continue, my phone rang, Harold Whitman from the firm. I'd been dodging his calls all week, and Shai should take this. Torres, where the hell are you? Harold barked when I answered. The Westridge developers have been waiting in the conference room for 20 minutes. I closed my eyes, remembering the meeting I'd completely forgotten. And at the Greenovation semifinals. I told Patricia I'd be out today. This is unacceptable, Harold snapped. C's clients represent potentially millions in billable hours. Get back here now. I looked at Summer, who was watching me with concern. Oh, I can't, Harold. I'm in the middle of something important. More important than your career? Because that's what's at stake. The threat hung in the air. 6 months ago, it would have sent me racing back to the office. Now, standing beside Summer, it felt hollow. "I'll be in tomorrow morning," I said and ended the call. Summer raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" And just my firm reminding me where my priorities should be. I smiled ruefully. And according to them, anyway. We spent the rest of the afternoon networking with other competitors and judges, careful to maintain professional distance despite the electricity that sparked between us whenever our eyes met across a room. That evening, at the reception announcing the finalists, Summer and I stood together, tense with anticipation. When Taurus Phillips Partnership was called as one of the 3 teams advancing to the finals, Summer grabbed my hand, forgetting our agreement to keep things professional. "Omu did it," she whispered, her eyes shining. I squeezed her hand, not caring who saw. The moment was perfect, until I spotted Patricia Lowell from my firm across the room, her eyes narrowed as she observed our clasped hands. Later, as we celebrated over dinner at a quiet restaurant away from the competition crowd, Summer finally returned to what she'd started to tell me earlier. "But my father isn't just competing against us," she said, setting down her fork. "He's been trying to buy the riverfront property our proposal is centered on." I stared at her. "What? Why didn't you tell me?" "And I just found out yesterday. An old friend at the city planning office tipped me off." She looked miserable. "If he secures the land before the final decision, our entire proposal becomes theoretical." The implications hit me hard. "So we need to move fast. I have contacts in the mayor's office who might be able to delay any sale." Summer reached across the table, her fingers finding mine. "This is why She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "Why you what?" I prompted. She took a deep breath. This is why I'm falling in love with you. You never back down from a fight." The words hung between us, momentous and fragile. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my office, 8 a.m. tomorrow. "We need to discuss your extracurricular activities." Looking at Summer's hopeful expression, I made a decision. Whatever Patricia wanted to discuss, whatever ultimatum my firm was preparing to deliver, it couldn't touch what was growing between Summer and me, or our determination to win this competition. "I'm falling in love with you too," I said, the truth of it washing over me like a wave. "And we're going to win this, together." What I didn't know then was that my firm had already made their choice, and that by morning, I would be facing the most difficult professional decision of my career. Patricia Lowell's office had always intimidated me, all glass and chrome, with a view of the Minneapolis skyline that reminded every visitor exactly how high they'd have to climb to reach her level. This morning it felt like an execution chamber. "Fruby," she gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Thank you for coming in early." Harold Whitman sat in the corner, his expression smug. I'd prepared for this moment all night, rehearsing arguments about work-life balance and the value of pro bono projects. None of that mattered now. I simply wanted it over with. "Let's cut to the chase," Patricia said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Do you know who the primary investor in Phillips Sustainable Development is?" I opened the folder to find documents showing Westridge Development, my firm's biggest client, as the majority stakeholder in Maxwell Phillips's company. "You didn't," I admitted, my stomach sinking. "So you didn't realize that by partnering with Summer Phillips, you were directly competing against our client's interests?" Harold's voice dripped with false concern. "Ent Westridge hired us 3 months ago," I countered. "Meant in my partnership with Summer was already established." "Nevertheless," Patricia interjected, "so we now have a serious conflict of interest. Westridge is threatening to pull all their business unless we resolve it immediately." I knew what was coming before she said it. "A need to withdraw from the Greenovation competition," Patricia continued. "Monday?" The demand hung in the air between us. Through the window behind Patricia, I could see the Mississippi River winding through downtown, the same river Summer and I had built our proposal around, the same river her mother and my mother had lived and died beside. "And if I refuse?" My voice was steadier than I felt. Patricia's expression softened slightly. "So, Ruby, you're one of our most promising associates. Don't throw away your career for this hobby." "It's not a hobby." I stood, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. It's the most meaningful work I've done since joining this firm. More meaningful than the partnership track? Harold scoffed. Don't be naive. And if I withdraw, I asked, ignoring him. What happens to Summer's proposal? Patricia shrugged. That's not our concern. But without legal expertise, I imagined she'd struggle to advance. The calculation was clear. They were willing to sacrifice Summer's dream to protect their client's interests. And they expected me to do the same. I need time to think, I said. And you have until noon, Patricia replied. And after that, we'll need to inform Westridge of your decision, whatever it may be. I left the office in a daze, walking aimlessly along the river until I found myself at the exact spot our proposal had designated for a community garden. The irony wasn't lost on me. Summer answered on the first ring. Hey, how did your meeting go? We need to talk, I said. In person? 20 minutes later, we sat on a bench overlooking the water, as I explained the ultimatum. Summer's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, resignation. So that's why my father seemed so confident, she said bitterly. And he knew your firm would force you to withdraw. And I haven't made my decision yet. Summer turned to me, her eyes wide. Ruby, you can't give up your career for this competition. It's not just about the competition anymore. I took her hand, not caring who might see. It's about what I want my life to mean. But your firm, 'tis been slowly killing my soul for 7 years. I smiled ruefully. Maybe this is the push I needed. Summer studied me, hope warring with concern in her expression. What would you do instead? And I don't know yet, but I'm tired of defending corporations that poison the same communities I grew up in. I squeezed her hand. Whatever I decide about the firm, I'm not withdrawing from our partnership. That's non-negotiable. The relief on her face was palpable. We still have a problem, though. The finals are next week, and my father is still trying to buy the riverfront property. And then we need to change our approach. An idea was forming, risky but potentially brilliant. What if we pivot again? Make our proposal less about that specific location and more about a template that could be applied anywhere? Summer's eyes lit up. Scalable model. Exactly. One that communities across the country could implement, regardless of who owns the land. I was thinking aloud now, excitement building, and would actually make our proposal stronger, more universal. And the judges would love that, Summer agreed, then hesitated. But it means completely reworking our presentation in less than a week. And so we pull some all-nighters. I shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. Summer leaned forward and kissed me, quick but fierce. This is why I love you. The words sent warmth spreading through my chest. And love you too. At noon, I walked back into Patricia's office. Harold was still there, looking expectant. Have you made your decision? Patricia asked. I placed my firm ID on her desk. I have. Harold sputtered. You're choosing that hippie crusade over a partnership at one of the most prestigious firms in the Midwest? Are you insane? Probably, I admitted. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm making the right choice. Patricia studied me, then nodded slowly. I respect your conviction, Ruby. It's a quality that would have made you an excellent partner. She extended her hand. I hope you find what you're looking for. As I left the building for the last time, a weight lifted from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from Summer. "Am I place in an hour? We have a presentation to rebuild." For the next 5 days, we barely slept, transforming our proposal into something even more revolutionary, a community-owned development model that could be implemented in any urban environment. When we weren't working, we were talking about the future, our future, with a freedom that felt intoxicating. What we didn't anticipate was how far Maxwell Phillips would go to win, or that the final presentation would force Summer to confront her past in ways neither of us had prepared for. The morning of the finals dawned bright and clear, Minneapolis showing off its early summer splendor. I stood in Summer's bathroom staring at my reflection, a woman I barely recognized, not because of the cancer that had reshaped my body months ago, but because of the confidence in my eyes. I'd walked away from a prestigious career, faced my mortality, and fallen in love. Somehow, I looked younger than I had in years. Freddie? Summer appeared in the doorway, radiant in a navy blue suit that matched her eyes. And I'll ever be. I turned to face her. No matter what happens today. She silenced me with a kiss. And no speeches yet. Save it for the judges. The convention center was packed with industry leaders, journalists, and curious locals drawn by the buzz surrounding the competition. Our revised presentation boards attracted a steady stream of visitors, many nodding appreciatively at our scalable community ownership model. "And your father's team is over there," I murmured to Summer, nodding toward the Phillips Sustainable Development display, a slick corporate vision of eco-friendly luxury housing. "And let him do his thing. We'll do ours." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept drifting toward her father's booth. An hour before presentations began, Summer disappeared to use the restroom. When she didn't return after 15 minutes, I went looking for her, eventually finding her in a quiet hallway, face pale. "What happened?" I asked, alarmed. "And Hay offered me a job." Her voice was hollow. My father said he'd make me head of a new community outreach division if I withdrew from the competition. "What did you say?" "And I told him to go to hell." She laughed shakily. But then he said something about Mom, that she always thought I'd come back to the family business eventually, that I was dishonoring her memory by fighting him. I took her hands, feeling them tremble in mine. "And you know that's manipulation." "Do I?" Her eyes met mine, filled with doubt. "What if he's right? What if all this," she gestured vaguely, encompassing our partnership, our proposal, us, "is just me being stubborn?" "And Summer," I held her gaze steadily, "own mother died because a corporation valued profit over human life. You're fighting to change that system. How could she be anything but proud?" She took a deep breath, then nodded. "You're right. I know you're right." She straightened her shoulders. "Oh, let's go win this thing." We were scheduled to present last, after Phillips' Sustainable Development. Watching Maxwell Phillips on stage was like witnessing a masterclass in corporate persuasion. Smooth, authoritative, promising luxury living with a veneer of environmental consciousness. The judges nodded along, clearly impressed by the technical specifications and financial projections. When our turn came, Summer took the lead, her voice clear and passionate as she outlined our vision for community-owned urban development. I followed with the legal and financial framework, emphasizing how our model could be adapted to any city facing gentrification and environmental challenges. "The difference between our proposal and others you've seen today," Summer concluded, "and is that we're not just building sustainable buildings, we're building sustainable communities. Because environmental justice isn't just about clean energy and green spaces, it's about who has access to them." The applause was enthusiastic, but I could see the judges whispering among themselves. One in particular, a renowned architect from Berlin, looked troubled. "Ms. Phillips," he said during the Q&A, "and your proposal is idealistic, perhaps admirably so. But how do you respond to criticism that community ownership models are financially unstable in the long term?" I saw Maxwell Phillips smirking in the audience. This was exactly the question his team had likely planted. Summer hesitated, just for a moment. I stepped forward, ready to answer, but she touched my arm lightly, stopping me. "And my father would tell you that profit is the only reliable motivator," she said, her voice steady. "Sydney taught me that lesson from childhood. But my mother showed me something different. She showed me that communities will fight for what they love." Her voice grew stronger. "And the financial models in our proposal demonstrate sustainability precisely because they're built on community investment, not just monetary but emotional and social." She looked directly at her father now. Said, "I've seen what happens when we prioritize profit over people. I watched my mother die because of it. I won't be part of perpetuating that system, no matter how lucrative the alternative might be." The room fell silent. Even the judges seemed taken aback by her raw honesty. Then, slowly, applause began, starting with a young woman in the back row and spreading until the entire hall was clapping. As we left the stage, I squeezed Summer's hand. That was incredible. Her smile was shaky but genuine, and finally said what I've needed to say for years. The judges deliberated for 2 hours. Summer and I waited in tense silence, occasionally exchanging glances that said more than words could. When they finally called all finalists back to the stage, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the announcements. Third place, Phillips Sustainable Development. I saw Maxwell Phillips's face tighten with anger as he accepted the bronze plaque. Second place. Torres Phillips Partnership. Summer's hand found mine, squeezing so hard it hurt. We'd come so close. And first place, with a unanimous decision from our judges. North Star Collective. The third team, a group of architects from Chicago, erupted in cheers. Summer and I applauded politely, disappointment washing over us in waves. As we accepted our second-place certificate and the accompanying check for $500,000, a quarter of what we'd hoped for but still substantial, Summer leaned close to my ear. "When we still won," she whispered. Maybe not the competition, but something more important. Looking at her radiant face, at the woman who had transformed my life in just 6 months, I knew she was right. Some victories couldn't be measured in dollar amounts or plaques. What we didn't know then was that second place would ultimately take us further than we ever imagined, and that the real journey was just beginning. 6 months after the Greenovation competition, I stood in the doorway of our new office space, a renovated warehouse overlooking the Mississippi River. The autumn light streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the reclaimed wood floors and the hand-painted sign that still made my heart skip, Torres Phillips Environmental Consulting. "What do you think?" Summer asked, coming up behind me and slipping her arms around my waist. "Worth leaving corporate law for?" I leaned back into her embrace, taking in the space that would house our growing team. Absolutely. The $500,000 second-place prize had been enough to launch our firm, which specialized in helping communities implement the very model we'd developed for the competition. To our surprise, coming in second had generated more publicity than winning. The story of an environmental lawyer leaving a prestigious firm to partner with an activist had captured media attention in ways we hadn't anticipated. "The Minneapolis Star-Tribune wants to interview us next week," Summer said, releasing me to adjust a crooked picture frame. A photo of us at the competition, holding our second-place certificate, grinning like we'd won the lottery. In many ways, we had. "Again?" I laughed. "That's the third interview this month. People love an underdog story." She shrugged. "Especially one with a happy ending." Our first client had been, ironically, the city of Minneapolis itself. The mayor, impressed by our presentation, had hired us to consult on a new riverfront development, one that incorporated community ownership and environmental justice principles. From there, inquiries had poured in from cities across the Midwest. "Did you confirm dinner with your father?" I asked, watching her expression carefully. Summer nodded, a mix of emotions crossing her face. 7 o'clock at Martina. The competition had changed more than just our professional lives. 2 months after we'd placed second, Maxwell Phillips had suffered a minor heart attack. During his recovery, he'd reached out to Summer, not to apologize exactly, but to open a door that had been closed for years. "Are you nervous?" I asked, taking her hand. "Terrified." She smiled wryly. "But ready. Having you there helps." The bell above our door jingled as our first employee arrived, Zoe, a recent environmental science graduate who'd approached us after reading about our firm. "Morning, bosses," she called cheerfully, carrying a tray of coffees. "When the contractor called. The solar panels are being delivered tomorrow." But Summer squeezed my hand before releasing it to help Zoe with the coffees. I watched her move through the space, confident and purposeful, so different from the woman I'd met at the Thanksgiving parade nearly a year ago. I'd changed too, no longer defined by my career or my diagnosis, but by the choices I'd made and the love I'd found. That evening, as we prepared for dinner with Maxwell Phillips, Summer emerged from our bedroom wearing a simple black dress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. "How do I look?" she asked, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Beautiful," I said truthfully. "He'll be proud of you." She came to me, adjusting my necklace, a small silver pendant shaped like a river that she'd given me on our 6-month anniversary. "And I don't need his pride anymore. But I'm glad to have yours." The restaurant was elegant but warm, with copper accents catching the candlelight. Maxwell Phillips was already seated when we arrived, rising to greet us with a formality that couldn't quite hide his nervousness. "And Summer." He kissed her cheek stiffly. "Ruby. Thank you for coming." Dinner began awkwardly, with careful small talk about the weather and the restaurant's acclaimed chef. But as the meal progressed, something shifted. Maxwell asked questions about our firm, genuine questions that showed he'd been following our progress. On your community ownership model, he said, swirling his wine thoughtfully. And I've been studying it. It's more viable than I initially gave it credit for. Summer's eyebrows rose. Is that an admission that you were wrong? A ghost of a smile crossed his face, so like Summer's that it startled me. Let's call it a recognition that there might be multiple paths to sustainability. By dessert, they were debating the merits of various green building materials with the ease of colleagues rather than estranged family members. When Maxwell mentioned a new development he was planning in St. Paul, Summer offered suggestions that he actually wrote down. Your mother would be proud, he said quietly as we prepared to leave. And of the work you're doing, of the woman you've become. Summer's eyes glistened. Thank you for saying that. Outside, as we waited for our car, Summer turned to me, snowflakes catching in her hair like stars. And that went better than I expected. He's trying, I said. That's something. Because of you, she replied, taking my hands in hers. So, you showed me it was possible to fight for what matters without losing myself in the battle. I smiled, remembering our first meeting. The spilled coffee, the ruined coat, the instant connection neither of us had been ready to acknowledge. I think we saved each other. Later that night, as we lay in bed planning our firm's expansion, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here, from adversaries to partners to lovers, to something that felt remarkably like family. What are you thinking about? Summer asked, noticing my silence. And sometimes the best things come from the worst moments, I said. As if I hadn't gotten sick, I might never have taken the risk to work with you. To love you. She propped herself up on one elbow, her face serious in the dim light. Do you ever regret it? Leaving your firm? The partnership track? I thought about my old life. The prestigious address. The corner office I'd been working toward. The emptiness that had filled my expensive condo. Then I looked at Summer. At the life we were building together. At the work that filled my days with purpose. Not for a second, I said, pulling her close. As snow fell softly outside our window, I realized that what had started as a competition had become something far more valuable. A second chance at life, at love, at leaving the world better than we found it. And that was a prize worth more than any first-place trophy could ever be.